So we were talking about it a moment ago that in addition to the debate itself tonight, it could be a big night for candidates who are maybe on Donald Trump's short list to be his running mate, many of whom are in Atlanta for the debate. And one of them joins us right now, the Florida Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for coming on. I will ask you, I promise, maybe you don't want me to, but I will ask you about, the running mate question. But I really would rather spend a little bit more time on the debate itself before that. We had a kind of a surrogate member of Congress on from the Democratic side earlier, and I was asking her some questions I think will come up for Joe Biden. I'd like to do the same with you for Donald Trump and see how you think he can or should handle those questions. Let me start with January 6th. I know that's going to come up. How do you think he should handle it? It'll be asked in some way, shape, or form. Peaceful transfer of power has been kind of a bedrock of our nation from the very beginning. He lost the last election. He still hasn't acknowledged the loss in the last election. So why would he be fit to serve as president again? How would he handle a question like that tonight?
Well, first, let me say that January 6th was a tough day for our country. I was on the House floor myself. Very tough day. But we still had the peaceful transfer of power. That did occur. Donald Trump did leave the Oval Office. Joe Biden was sworn in on January 20. It was a very tough period, but our country moves forward regardless. I think as you move forward from that 4 years later, look what's happened to the place. Our economy is not good. It's flat on its back, quite frankly. We are stagnant. Inflation is through the roof. Year-over-year inflation might be down, but the prices are massively up since Joe Biden took the oath of office. And in foreign policy, the country, we're in a tough spot on a global scale. We have conflicts around the globe. These conflicts have really only happened because of Joe Biden's weakness and the lack of leadership from him. So you could talk about January 6th, tough day, but the American people are living with the fallout of Joe Biden's agenda, and we need a change, and that change is Donald Trump.
So that sounds like a pivot, right? So you would pivot to other issues that you think are advantageous if you're President Trump, and one of them you think is the economy, right? And inflation. And those, you're right, those inflation figures have not been great. In fact, I brought it up last hour for Biden. Do you say, well, you pumped too much money into the economy, Mr. President? Did that make things worse earlier in your tenure? For President Trump, however, you have these economists coming out lately. We had a guy named Mark Zandi on our show. There was a whole group of Nobel laureates the other day. You probably saw this. They say Trump's plan on the economy, his tariff plan, would actually make things worse in terms of inflation. So what about that?
Well, the first thing I would say is Mark Zandi has never met a stimulus package that he did not love. That's number one. Number two, these are the same economists who back in 2016 said that his tax plan then was going to be inflationary, that it was going to cost the federal government money, when in actuality, the federal government has raised more revenue as a percentage of our economy and in absolute dollars than at any other time in American history. That is the current tax plan that exists in the United States. These same economists bash that plan. So obviously they don't know what they're talking about. Unfortunately, we do have economists who play politics, and it's very convenient that this report comes out 2 days before an election. All you have to do is look at the economic record of Donald Trump. Our economy was roaring. Every demographic group was thriving. Wages were massively ahead of inflation, and the federal government did not have a problem taking in tax revenue with lower tax rates. That's the actual evidence of the Trump agenda once. It'll be the evidence of a Trump agenda again.
The other issue that'll come up, and it's been, whereas the economy, to your point, has been advantage Republican, whereas immigration has been advantage Republican, is reproductive rights. The abortion politics will undoubtedly be raised tonight. That's been advantage Democrat. How should Donald Trump define his position? He's gone back and forth over the years on his position on this particular issue. Tonight, when he's asked about it, how explicit does he need to be, and what do you think he should say?
Well, I think I've talked to the president about this. His position is that this needs to be left to the states, that there's not going to be some federal action that's going to happen at the federal level. The states are going to decide. So every state's going to have their own laws about how to govern abortion. Look, abortion, very personal topic. It is the most personal thing that happens in our politics, and it's the most divisive topic in our politics. But you got to understand that the place where this has to be really adjudicated and figured out is at the state level, where citizens can work with governors and members of the state legislatures in all the 50 states to figure out how that's going to work in their state. I think you have Democrats who say we want to have a national thing where you could abort a child till 9 months. That's insanity. European countries don't allow abortion until 9 months, but that's what the Democrats want to do. Joe Biden needs to answer at what point is enough. And so that's a simple thing that we have to understand. But Donald Trump's position is clear. He wants the states to deal with this. The federal government has a lot of issues it's got to work through. Abortion is a state's matter now in our country.
I'm sure President Biden will say nobody wants to go up to 9 months. But what about on other issues related to reproductive rights like IVF? How do you think President Trump should handle that?
President Trump is 100% in favor of IVF. Actually, when the Alabama Supreme Court came out with that ruling, it was Donald Trump who came out and said Alabama needs to get with their legislature and their governor, and they need to fix this to protect IVF. But I will go back to what you just said. Joe Biden has never said what the upper limit is on abortion. The reason why he's never said that is because he doesn't have any problems with a baby being aborted in the 8th month or the 9th month. Frankly, that is obscene. No, very, very, very few Americans, except for the radical left, believe in that position.
We'll see how much it comes up tonight and how, to your point, the president actually handles that direct question if he's asked about the limits and the time limits on abortion or the timing. Final thing, Congressman, before I let you go, I mentioned we were going to talk about this whole, everybody says Veep stakes. I don't even know if that's a word. But your name's been mentioned. Other names have been mentioned as well. And the idea that somehow this is an apprentice-like audition going on in Atlanta. What would you say? There are the other names that are on this: J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Tim Scott. And I've mentioned in the last segment that Governor Burgum's name has come up a lot. What about being President Trump's running mate? Has he talked to you about it?
Well, I'm not going to get into conversations about that with the president or his team. They're going to make a decision. He, frankly, is going to be the person that makes that decision. Whatever he does, I'm going to respect it. I think if you look at that list, what it demonstrates is the breadth of talent that is in the Republican Party, where you have many people, whether they're members of the House, members of the Senate, governors, etc., who would have the ability to step in on day one and do that job, being his partner in the White House, being the vice president. I will tell you this, any one of us on that list, we are a significant upgrade over Kamala Harris.
Right. What if you had to debate Kamala Harris? How would you handle that one if you were the pick and you were on the debate stage with her?
The vice president and I will have a great time. The American people will see a stark contrast, not just in policy, but what it actually means for the American people going forward.
Congressman, thank you for the back and forth today on this ahead of the debate tonight, which we'll all be watching. Congressman Byron Donalds, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Quick break. We'll be right back here on News Nation.